I know I'm the mother.
I wonder if they have last time.
Right. So you're right. 9/11, right? Might be
Hey, Lisa, we're gonna do a quick test. Can you hear us online?
I can, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Maybe try increasing the volume. Thanks. And the youngest had understanding. All right, we'll go ahead and get started if everybody wants to take a seat. And everybody's welcome to sit at the table, and nobody has to sit in the back. Yeah, you can sit. All right, I'm assuming everybody can hear me okay online. Good morning. Thank you all for attending today's meeting and for the interest that's shown in this particular project. My name is Rachel Bodo. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director for Acadiana Planning Commission. And I'll get into, in a few minutes, we get into a little bit of the partnership. Today, I guess the purpose of the meeting, so we had to pivot a little bit. So this is more of a request for just interest and who's interested in the project. We'd like to give a lot of background about how this project came to be, the federal funding sources that are involved with the project, so you can understand some of the limitations that we have on the actual implementation of the project. And then also to give a little brief, I guess, summary of what the intention of the project is and the intended purpose of what it's going to serve and do for the community. And then we'll wrap up with a couple of questions from you guys, but we're not going to get into the actual RFP questions. We hope probably within the next 2 weeks that we'll actually publicly release the RFP. And at that point, if you guys have questions, we're going to go, it is a public process, so we're going to go through a period of questions and answers. Any questions that are fielded to us will be made publicly available for the rest for everyone to see who might be interested in it. So we'll do a lot of the communication via our website. And then we'll also post different legal ads, probably notices in Facebook, LinkedIn, and that sort of thing. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So like I said, I'm with the Acadiana Planning Commission. The Acadiana Planning Commission is one of 8 planning districts throughout the state of Louisiana. A planning district we were legislatively enabled, I think back in the 70s, to do multi-jurisdictional planning. We serve a region of 7 parishes, which includes Acadia, Evangeline, Iberia, Lafayette, St. Landry, St. Martin, and Vermilion, which is most of the project scope area. APC, we focus primarily on community development, economic development, transportation planning, and have been more recently involved in a lot of watershed planning and or drainage conversations. You want to go to the next slide? So the objective of the project, we after the floods of 2016, which most of you might, who in here is from out of state? Anybody? Couple people. All right. Okay, good. So in the state of Louisiana, back in 2016, there was this pretty significant flood that happened in the Acadiana area as well as other areas in the state of Louisiana. After 2016, APC got involved in a lot of recovery efforts and in a lot of conversations about resiliency and long-term recovery with the state. And so out of those conversations came this concept and came this project about doing a sensor network throughout the entire region to increase our data and to enhance our science. So the main objective of the Acadiana Regional Gauge Network, which is what we're calling it, is to provide that innovative feedback for science-based decision-making. And this might be, it's not new concepts. This is done elsewhere throughout the nation. It's just not done very well here in the state of Louisiana. So a lot of times we have our elected officials making drainage decisions, but they don't always have the critical tools to make those decisions on our behalf. So we, in conversations with OCD, with GOSEP, with FEMA, came this project. And so we'll get into the specifics of that if you want to go to the next slide, Sean. What I want to do is just take a moment and maybe do roundtable introductions, just so we can understand the players in the room. We're hoping that some of you may make some contacts, because I'm not sure that one company can fulfill all of the requirements of the RFP. So it may be a team of people that might want to, collaborate with one another to put a proposal together. So I'll stop and I'll start here, and then we'll just go around the room, and then we'll introduce those that are participating online as well.
I'm Kevin LaBe with Xylem. Work here in the Lafayette area, all over North America. We do water quality, water quantity.
It's Matt Previn. I'm also with Xylem YSI with our integrated systems and services group. We do installations of all type of equipment for projects like this.
Thank you.
Kyle Waits, also with Xylem YSI. I live in Baton Rouge. Yeah, and I think Kevin and Matt summed up what we do pretty well. So, thank you.
Boyd Boswell with T. Baker Smith, here in Lafayette, with Coast Engineering Survey and Environment.
Thank you, Boyd.
Brady Trahan with T. Baker Smith, almost here in Lafayette as well.
Wade with ARGN, service water and water quality provider.
Thank you, Wade.
Roger Kibo, CC Lynch from Lafayette.
Thank you, Roger.
Chris Seymour, CC Lynch. Zach Carrington, also CC Lynch, for instrumentation, sales and service, water quality, water flow.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Winnie Broussard with Freeze and Nichols. Coyle Blanc out of Lafayette, with Mr. Maker, part of the remote sensing scientist. Part of
Ian Tron with the Maker here in Lafayette, for the engineering department.
Thank you.
Anthony Tilley with Resource Environmental Solutions out of West Palm Beach, Florida, with another
Okay. Thank you.
Imad Habib with the University of Lafayette.
Robert Miller, UL Lafayette.
And Emad and Robert are part of our team that is putting the proposal together, as well as Donald here. And we'll get into, they'll do a little bit more introductions a little bit later. And Donnie, you want to just say the word?
Donald Segura with Tesh Vermilion Freshwater District.
Kelly Boone, McKinney Planning Commission on Watershed Spring.
And everybody should know this guy via email.
I'm Sean Reed. I'm project manager on the ERP coordinator on this project.
Charlotte Phillips and HPR engineer.
And then we'll turn to online. If you could pull it up, Sean. Sorry. All right, Julian, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time in hearing everybody. My speakers aren't working too well, so I can hear you, but really no one else. But my name is Julian Shores. I'm with AEM Advanced Environmental Monitoring, based out of High Point, North Carolina. Account executive.
Thank you, Julian. Larry?
Good morning. My name is Larry Kramer, here in Lafayette, consulting, civil engineering and land surveying company.
Thank you, Larry. Brian?
Sorry about that. Brian with Campbell Scientific, the proposal manager on these kind of projects for us.
Thank you, Brian. Jeremy?
Yes, Jeremy Thompson. I'm with Hydromet. I'm the Southeast Territory Manager based out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Thank you, Jeremy. Keith?
Keith Thibodeau, BBP Sales Account Manager out of Lafayette, Louisiana.
Thank you. And then Lisa.
Hi, Lisa Landry with Xylem YSI Sontech, Account and Business Development Manager based out of Mandeville, Louisiana.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Did I miss anybody online? David?
Yeah, good morning. This is David. I represent Campbell Scientific out of Logan, Utah.
I think I got everybody. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Next slide, Sean. Thank you again. Thank you all for your interest in participating today. So a little bit of background, I told you a little bit about APC, who we are. How the project originated was really a request from our locals to have more science and data to make critical decisions in our waterways. Out of that, so the funds are originating from FEMA. It's the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So there are federal funds and there's quite a few restrictions on that, which you'll see in the RFP. But essentially, we decided through this process and through applying for the funds is to deploy a sensor network of up to 137 sensors. And we'll get into what those look like. Robert to give us a little bit more information about the types of sensors we're looking for. We are primarily focused on, the stream flow, non-contact rain sensors, non-contact velocity, and some contact velocity sensors as well. And then there will likely have some water quality components, very limited, but there will be some. And we just to, let you all know, we will make this presentation available online. We are recording today's meeting, so that will also be posted online as well as an agenda, and everything will be made publicly available. Next slide. So obviously currently our region lacks, a lot of science. And so that's the premise of what we're trying to do. I think I went through all this information. Let me mention this. So part of the GAGE project, obviously there needs to be some surveying with this. And as many of you know, the telemetry side of things also will be included in the RFP. So we're looking at, there is going to be a level of innovation that we're asking people to propose with regard to the telemetry and also the web visualization portal. So while we are deploying a sensor network, it's not just about the science to make decisions, but it's also, we want it to serve as a community engagement tool. Much like you see with USGS, that you can click on gauges and you can secure information online. We also want that to be made available to the public as well. So if the public wants to look at a particular sensor, see how it may impact downstream or their particular property or their area, we want to ensure that that's made available to the public. We've even discussed possibly incorporating on the web visualization or the web-based portal is some sort of information just about watersheds in general. So that may be a component of that as well. And then we've been in conversations as well. USGS did suggest a while back ago about possibly tapping into some of the satellites to create redundancy in the telemetry system. So we're exploring what that might look like. This, we're in conversations with NOAA, with National Weather Service, so we're trying to figure out what that looks like, but that might be a component as well to this project. Next slide, Sean. So like I said, these funds are hazard mitigation funds. Back in 2017, there was an allocation to the region, and that's where these funds are originating from. And just to kind of give you some context, and there's quite a few other projects that were allocated at that point in time. So that's the intention of this slide, just to show you where the funds were coming from. That it's, it's federal funds. Next slide, Sean. A little bit more about APC. So our intention with this, whenever we started out, we were considered a FEMA pilot. And essentially what that meant is that we were piloting a lot of the recovery conversations within our region. So as you see, we're at APC, our border is region 4. And we're focused on these 5 watersheds that you see here, which is the Teche, the Vermilion, the Mermentau and Mermentau headwaters, as well as some components of the Teche within relation to the larger LWI effort and the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, which I won't get into today. But for the purposes of this project, we're not only including just our 7 parishes, but we've also included St. Mary into the proposal. Next slide, Sean. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Imad. And Imad's going to talk a little bit about, I should have probably explained the Louisiana Watershed Initiative a little bit more. But while we have an effort to deploy sensors in the Acadiana region, there's a much larger effort throughout the state of Louisiana from those who are out of state to do watershed planning on a HUC 8 level. We have within our Acadiana region and APC, we're the fiscal agent for Region 5, which encompasses 16 parishes and 5 of the watersheds, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. But while we're looking at a scale in the region for gauges, there's a much larger effort through LWI to do sensors throughout the entire state of Louisiana. That's already underway. It's in partnership with USGS, but Iman's going to get into specifics about how this basically will interact with LWI. And do you also want to just say a little bit about the UL watershed?
Sure, yeah. So good morning, everyone. My name is Imad again. I'm with the UL Civil Engineering Department and also the director of the Watershed Flood Center that we have established, maybe 6 years ago. And we're happy to work with APC on starting this project. Maybe how many years ago now? At least maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago when we.
So for those who know, this project has been ongoing for the last 3 years.
But it was really a pioneering effort from the region here, and we started talking about it even before the Watershed Initiative, thought about this effort for the state, and I think we were part of the LWI network, and I think LWI was inspired by what Acadiana was trying to do in terms of enhancing monitoring. But I'm gonna go over this very quickly so that we can have time for the actual project here. But this is the LWI, which you're all familiar with, is also putting about 100 gauging sites throughout the state. UL, myself, Robert, and a few colleagues actually developed a design for that network for the entire state in collaboration with USGS and the Weather Service. And it's currently in deployment. If you go to the next slide, this is the design that we came up, to put gauges. It's a busy slide. You can always go to the LWI site to look at which gauges will actually be on the ground. In region 5, here region 5 is LWI region 5. We will have about 13 gauges that measure flow one way or another, and then about 5 stage only gauges. You can tell from the number, those 18 out of the 100, for our region, it's a good number that the region is getting, but that also explains the need for, a lot more gauges for the region here. And I think that's where this new network that we are meeting about today will come into the picture. Those gauges will be primarily on major rivers and major coulees. We hope the network that we're talking about today will fill in all these still important coulees and waterways and what have you, at a much refined scale, and hopefully it will connect with the macro scale that this network is looking at. There's a website here, if you are curious also, that from USGS. USGS is installing this network. The state had an agreement with them to install the state is funding it through the HUD program, I think, and USGS in collaboration with DEQ is putting it on the ground. So that site here, I know you guys will share the slides. You can go and see what has actually been installed already. The map on the lower part here shows the sites that have been installed in Louisiana already. So
you have the CRIMS gauges along the
right, yeah. This is also published on our published as part of our report with the LWI. So if you go to the LWI site, you can actually see the full report that we put for the design, and also the map that shows you the proposed locations and existing locations and so forth. So anything here that is actually blue X and yellow cross is a new gauge that the state will put. Okay, so next slide. So,
excuse me, can y'all please share the slides online?
we are not sharing. Oh.
Thank you for letting us know that, Keith. Can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. We're gonna go back one. That was the only slide I think of real significance that
Right.
you might have missed.
Right, yeah. So I'm just gonna say a few more words about it since we missed that slide. The map here shows the gauges that the state is actually installing as part of their Watershed Initiative program. And these are all gonna be installed by USGS. And the network that we're talking about today will fill in a lot more details at the regional scale here in our region. So just for context, this way, if you hear about this effort or heard about it, that's how the two relate, and that's how they are different. Altogether, there will be 18 new gauges put in our region here. And now we're talking about 100 plus more gauges that this project is going to put just for our region. So you can get the scale. It's a very, I think it's a very visionary effort from the region, from community, from APC, from everybody in the room. It will change how we understand, water management in our region, and I think it will make the communities here a lot more resilient, a lot more informed about flooding and water in general. So yeah, I think like Rachel said, we are here today to talk about now focusing on that particular area, and we're talking about the Acadiana Gauge network. And I think next slide is right. So okay, well, it's again about the watershed flood center at UL. We work with APC and Tesh Vermilion from the get-go, trying to think about how many gauges we want in the region, where to put them, and what criteria, what kind of sensors. And I think it started sometime after 2016, so it's almost 5 to 6 years. But it's exciting that we are here today. The flood center at UL, we work with APC, we work with the region, Tesh Vermilion. We also work with the state heavily on their LWI program, and also with the Corps of Engineers. So we try to actually provide a lot of science-based support to the region and the communities, and we're very proud of that. So next slide. These are some typical, so getting to the project. So I'll cover a couple more slides that talk about the general picture, and then maybe Robert will come and fill a lot more details about the specific sites and the types of gauges and so forth. But we are primarily interested in monitoring stage, of course, rainfall, so stage, and also some form of a velocity or flow measurements depending on the type of the stream. But primarily it's stage and rainfall, and selected sites will be velocity to estimate and calculate flow rates. We are looking at a mix of contact and primarily non-contact sensors, and these sensors should be transmitting data in real time to some central location that communicate that data with the public. That's kind of in very general terms. Next slide, please. Again, just to give you a very quick idea about how we came up with the specific locations of the network. So Robert and myself, we worked on this design, trying to take into account a lot of criteria, the watersheds, the streams, the population, the roads and bridges, and where flooding happens, the repetitive flooding, the land use. And if you can play that, it will show you how we kind of put all this information together through a lot of GIS and hydraulic and hydrologic analysis to come up with some recommendations on where to put the gauges. So it's a one slide that summarizes almost a whole year of work to look at optimal locations in terms of where to put. So this just to show you the amount of information that we put together. And it's similar to the methodology that we use to design the network for the LWI as well. So putting all this information, cooking them together through combined analysis from just GIS and hydraulic and hydrologic knowledge and modeling also. The next slide shows actually the locations, I think, of the specific. So, well, maybe I'll turn it over here to Rachel. You go through the timeline, and then Robert and I will come back with a couple more notes on that.
So just to give you an idea of the level of work, Imad talked about the H&H background and the analysis that they went through to actually come up with the design. But in addition to that, we actually went to each of the parishes that are going to be participating in the project to meet with their local engineers, to meet with public works directors, floodplain managers, and even local OEP directors to understand what are their needs within the community. So we presented them with a preliminary design from an H&H perspective and asked them for feedback on the design to see, did we get it right? are there areas that we're missing? So this just kind of shows to catalog the different meetings that we conducted since 2020. Again, these are FEMA funds. They're kind of slow. And when we started this project, the initial, I guess, request that we received was to put together a preliminary design so that it could go through their environmental review process. It could go through their large public notification process and so on and so forth. So part of that within the scope, I guess the phase one of this project was really engaging our local technical folks on the ground with like information that they're seeing in their particular parishes. The next slide, again, it's the same thing. We had like 8 meetings within, I don't know, 6 months, I think. And then we had also participation from some of our state and federal agencies. Next slide, Sean. And again, we finished up in around March of the 29th of March in 2021. So we had a total of 10 meetings, 88 attendees throughout those 10 meetings. Again, public works, local engineers, floodplain, and that was the information that went into the actual engineering. So we've gone through FEMA's environmentals. It's been approved. We've received some certain criteria that we'll have to include in the RFP as conditions of the deployment. And then we've also, in this process, we've secured most of the permitting needed in order to deploy the gauges. So the project should be ready for construction. There might be a few servitudes that will be required, might be a few permits that may still be outstanding, but we're probably 85% to 90% through permitting, just to kind of give you guys an idea.
I mean, I forgot about all those meetings, right?
It was a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, yeah. And I think we took the feedback that we gathered from these meetings, 88 attendees and what, like 10 meetings almost throughout the state. It was a lot of fun.
We created a feedback tool so
Right.
everybody could report on the actual locations they want to see.
Right.
Gauges installed based on their knowledge of flooding and I guess pinch points within the tributaries and riverine areas.
Right. So, yeah, so this is the portal was used for people to provide their feedback. They like this, they want to move it around. Alicia with APC did a great job in actually developing that. And I think the outcome of that process was the final design that we had, which is 100 gauges and 38 alternative sites. I think you can, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, it's online. I think this is available hyperlink here from APC. And it shows the specific locations, 100 gauges, 38 alternative gauges, what is flow and what stage and what have you. So you can actually see it there online to get an idea about the specific locations of the gauges. And next slide.
So yeah, if you visit our website at planacadiana.org, you can see this public tool. It's available for everybody just to give you an idea of the gauge sites.
Right.
And we'll also send this out via email after the meeting.
So Robert, do you want to come and please, and share more information about the locations and
Sure. So now that we are, I guess, getting to towards the end of it, we want to make sure that in addition to the locations, okay, so the scope really here is floods, and that's really what the focus is. We may have some water quality, a few, but majority of this is about floods. And so the type of relevant information that would need to be gathered at each location is kind of shown here. This is the existing gauge at Surrey Street. So, instead of just a data stream of, okay, here's the water level, and here's the, like, what does that mean, right? So high top of bridge, maybe low still elevation, or if you're dealing with a girder, probably want to get a shot on the bottom of the structures to give more context, and then also the high bank elevation so that we can know kind of relative to the levels in the river or the bayou or the coulee, how high is that water to the nearest, high bank. So that would be the sort of information I think that would need to be collected in addition while we're deploying, so that information could be put on the web portal. And so viewers can click and see like, oh, well, this is how high the water is relative to things that I know, right? That sort of thing. So I just wanted to show that as an example. This was a flood in 2019, June 2019 on the Vermilion River. If we can go to the next slide, please.
In terms of examples of how these gauges are gonna look, this is an example from the USGS. It's one of the LWI sensors. This is actually two locations. One is at the Ruth Canal, which is at LA Highway 31 here. They implemented a velocity sensor. And so this is just to get a flavor of what we're kind of thinking about in terms of how some of these gauges might look. All of these are contact sensors. The one that you see on the left here, this is at north of Interstate 10. This is one of the newly deployed sites there. And so you can see how they have the instruments attached. Basically, the attachment is basically bolted on here to the girder. So that was a part of the permitting process to get permit clearance that, okay, how are you going to fasten these things to the bridges? And so we basically put together some drawings or whatnot so that we can get through the permitting. But just to kind of give you an idea of that, how these might look. You can go to the next slide. So throughout the system, you have a lot of different conditions, right? It's not just a nice bridge. Most of them, in fact, will be on bridges, which is fortunate for us. A lot of these non-contact sensors, the idea is you just attach it, bolt it to a bridge, and then it'll sit out there and it'll give you water level from the stage measurement.
Or maybe not bolt to the actual bridge.
Or maybe, right, maybe not both, but actually the guardrails, we were approved to do the guardrail. So DOTD, one of the issues they brought up in the meeting was that bolting to the piers, that they might not really like that. So we might have to do something like straps or something.
And you'll see that in the RFP.
Yeah, you'll see that there in more detail, but this is another type. This is out of Delcom, so this will be one of the potential locations. So we'll need to attach to the fenders because this is a movable bridge. It's a drawbridge, so you're not really going to be able to like put the sensor on the moving parts. But there's a fender system, and then of course there's a railroad track, but you're not going to be able to attach really to the railroads. So the fenders would be the likely attachment mechanism there. So what we did is through all of the locations, we basically went into each one to see exactly what is there and how we think that we would attach to that. So these are just like, we kind of like broke it into like basically 8 install types, right? And so for each one, we will be able to classify the location based on its installation type. So a fender is one of those types. If you can go to the next one. This will be probably a more common one where you basically have like a platform or something that you're going to attach to. You're going to have like a steel column, and the sensor will it'll either have an arm if it's in the case of a non-contact, it'll have an arm, and then sensor will be out there on the arm, and then it'll measure water level or velocity. And in the case of a contact sensor, of course, it'll have a little conduit down into the water where the sensor will reside. And these are just some pictures that we got from talking with Calcasieu Parish, because they have a lot of these out there. And so they were generous with their time in telling us their lessons learned and sharing with us some of the photos. You can go to the next slide. Probably less than 2% of the sites will be like this, but we did have some requests for sites that are going to be located in navigable waterways. So for example, you have, I think 1 or 2 or 3, maybe in St. Mary Parish that are like on an intercoastal waterway. And there's another one inside of the Atchafalaya Basin. And so if you can imagine in those areas, there's a lot of water level variation. So you're going to need to have a platform. Probably you're going to have to drive piles and do that stuff. So very few of the sites are like this. Like I said, most of them are on a bridge, connecting to a bridge, either that or you're going to have a steel column. That's the majority of them. And, but we did have to account for these platforms as well for a few locations. So they would maybe look like this. In fact, this is the Sabine Pass site for a NOAA. It would probably end up looking something like this. Maybe not with all of that equipment, but the structure may look very much like this. You can go to the next slide. In addition, we were thinking to, of course, you're going to need this for flow. If you're going to convert velocity over to flow, you're going to have a channel cross section. The idea, of course, is that for water level, they're going to have to tie in all of that. So you're going to have surveyors on site. So of course, if we can get a cross section of the channels, then that would be a necessary thing at the different gauge locations. And I think that would also supplement the regional efforts for modeling. I think Gal Garland is here and he can kind of speak a little bit to that. But I think just having survey will be very helpful at each location. So that'll be a big part as well. And so yeah, just channel surveys will be required. We can go to the next slide. Maybe I will let maybe Imad maybe mention something about the web portal part. I think this is going to be a significant part of the project.
Well, thank you, Robert. Yeah, so you can see a lot of effort, actually. Robert spent enormous amount of hours going to the sites and going online. So that, you know, it's a complex project, right? I mean, it's not an easy project with this number of sites. And we also think, you know, that there should be a very innovative web portal that comes along with this project. You know, nothing on this slide that's really out of the I mean, we're talking about a publicly accessible website, user-friendly, basic functionality, you know, the minimum functionality, I would say, that you should be able to access the data, you should be able to download it, you should also be able to visualize the data, slice it and dice in different ways, historical and current, right? You should be able to interact with the current data that's being fed to the site, and also look at the historical data, historical meaning the data that just from previous events. Maybe it should integrate also data from existing sites, whether it's the USGS or the National Weather Service. It's all available via API. You can just literally, you know, bring it into the portal. We are also talking about the ability to sign up for alerts, to provide, you know, alerts to the website depending on the elevation of the stage that the gate is reading and the relative elevation to the road or to the bridge or what have you. Again, these are very high level ideas that there's a lot of details behind it, but that's kind of the minimum functionality we think the portal should provide. And we know that there's a lot of innovation in the industry out there. You guys are, you know, on top of these things. Every day there's a new technology comes in. There's so this is not by any means to say this is only this is the only stuff that the project is looking for, but these are just kind of the basic functionalities. And we did some research over the last 2-3 years. Every day there's something new coming up, right? So there's no way that we can think of all the great functionalities that a portal like that can actually provide. We want to turn this into become something that's more than just a gauge in the field that, hey, it's reading 5 feet. Okay, well, you know, community engagement, you know, modeling and enhancing of water management. So next slide, we looked at some examples. And you know, online there's plenty of them. Maybe some of you in the room here have developed some portals like that. So these are just here just for examples, you know, for so this is an example from Harris County. You can see, you know, some of the functionality that I talked about, you know, in terms of just interacting with the site through a geospatial interface like that, zooming in, zooming out, all that kind of stuff. And then you can toggle between the different gauges. You can look at specific sites. You can filter by gauge type, you can search for a location, all these great functionalities that are existing there. And I think on the right side here, you can see, you know, an example. When you click a gauge, you can see the location, maybe some sort of alert that you can sign up for there. I think that site particularly does that. Again, like I said, I'm sure, you know, this is an example of how you can actually I think pull the data, the past data, and download it to your desktop. So there's a login functionality there. You know, I guess it's part of Harris County. Next one, there's another example here that, again, it's really those examples we just kind of pull them from the internet. It really does not necessarily say that this is exactly what we want, but I just want to include some examples that would just allow us to discuss the web portal capabilities. This is from Texas again, I think, from Austin, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, there's the USGS portal that does a lot of great things as well. There are many other examples that in the state here and out of state. There are so many examples in Iowa and North Carolina, and it just throughout. And like I said, I'm sure many of you in the room, you have participated in some of these efforts before. One particular functionality that I talked about is the alerts, right? To actually be able to visualize some, you know, indication that this gauge is getting close to flooding stage, maybe if we have the information, and also to sign up for alerts and emails to receive those reports or what have you, so we can talk about that as well. Next slide, I think. Yeah, I'll turn it back to Robert to talk about, like I said, there's a lot of innovation in the industry, and we are really looking for ideas in the RFPs, the responses on how we can develop the most innovative cutting edge projects. So Robert will share some thoughts along that.
Right, and thanks, Imad, and I think we're pretty close to being done with the presentation. But when you're out there in the field, you realize that, man, there's all these things to consider. So whenever a solution is being proposed, we would solicit innovation, because I'm looking at some of these things and I'm like, man, how would we really deal with that? Of course, we have hurricanes and tropical storms to deal with here. So you would imagine that this stuff has to last in high winds, high water. There are high temperature fluctuations as well. You can go from 20 degrees in the winter and then go up to 100 plus. What does that do to the signals? Well, I mean, you guys are the experts and know how to handle these sort of things. One of the big keys to this project, I think, and this is what we've been stressing from the beginning meetings, is consistency in the vertical datums. It's a big challenge, right? How do we make sure that the datums are consistent and clearly specified across the network, so that we don't have one gauge on this and another gauge on that, and then we're trying to make sense out of this and it's confusing. That'll be a big deal, and we know we're in a subsidence area, so it was floated out there at one point to possibly have like maybe GPS units at strategic gauges, so that you don't have to always go back and then reestablish the vertical. And maybe can do it somewhat dynamically, but then at the same time, there's a cost trade-off as well. So we'll be looking for innovation in that regard. Some things other things that we heard was that maybe potentially we could have staff gauges at strategic locations. Number 5 here, everybody knows, right? How do we make it to where the network doesn't go down? So we're looking for robust solutions, right? So that, in the event, we need it during the storm event, right? If it's going down during the storm event, then it's not as useful to go and download the data later on. We'd like to be able to keep it going as much as possible. Other considerations to possibly think about from the innovation standpoint are O&M costs long-term. So think about like, okay, what type of communication system is going to be easy to use? Is it going to be reliable for people using this 5-10 years down the road? These sort of things. Of course, there's so many different types of vandalism that could possibly happen, as everybody in the room probably is well aware of. Some people like to take shots at gauges and that sort of thing. There's vessel collisions to concern ourselves about, and then possibly other types of interference that I didn't mention or didn't think about. We do have quite a few non-contact sensors. So the question of the relative accuracy of non-contact, so whatever solutions are proposed, if they can reflect an innovative solution to make sure that we have accurate non-contact data, that'll be important. Yeah, and I think the other ones we've kind of mentioned, but it was also brought out possibly strategically using cameras as well, right? At certain locations to kind of supplement. I think here in Lafayette, City of Lafayette has a camera system at different gauge locations, and they've indicated that has been very useful to supplement the actual measurements, to be able to see what's actually going on. Possibly, maybe not just a steady data stream like a video, because that can get very huge. And then where do you store that? And do you need to store that if you're going through a drought like we are right now, right? So maybe there's an innovative solution there where, hey, maybe we only get it once every so often, and then we purge if we're not seeing anything, like this sort of innovation. And that I'm not very good at explaining, but if you get my drift, so to speak. I think that's all I have right here. And then we'll go to the closing slide, and I'll turn it back to Rachel.
So I think we've introduced everybody. I do want to take an opportunity, Donald, if you want to say a few words about who you are, who you represent, and maybe a little bit about the importance of this project to you.
Just a very short presentation, but what our district does is to supplement flows of water to the Tesh Vermilion watershed whenever it's not raining. Like right now, for example, if it would not be for the pump station that our district has on the Atchafalaya River, pumping water from the Atchafalaya River into the watershed, then you can about imagine how low the water would be especially in the upper part of the watershed and upper Bayou Teche and Bayou Catawba, in those areas that are not tidal. Before the flood of 2016, we at the district started doing a lot more monitoring of water levels. And what we did was just look at different gauges that were already existing out in the watershed. And we did add a few cameras at where we read each day, we read staff gauges. Whenever this project came about, we became very interested in it because this is exactly what we need to have more gauges and to have those gauges on the same datum and something that we can add to the gauges that we're already monitoring. So that's why our district got involved in the project. I'd like to thank all of you for your interest and the interest that you have shown over the past several years and your patience and all of the information that you've provided. I know that you have a lot of equipment that provides a lot of good information, and I know that you've made that known to us. So we really appreciate that from you, and we appreciate all the input that the university has had and the Kitty Planning Commission has had in getting us to this point. We know there's a long way yet to go, but we're glad that we're at the point now where we can start putting together this request for proposals. So thanks again for all of your help and interest. We're looking forward to continuing working forward with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. So with that, that concludes the presentation. Again, the intention or the goal of today was just to provide you some background information, some baseline information, so it could help you whenever the proposal does come out, that you'll have kind of a leg up, if you will. So with that, I'm going to kind of open it up to questions. Again, the RFP is not out. I can't answer specifics about the RFP itself, but if you have any specifics on or specific questions on the information that was presented today, we'd be happy to entertain some of those.
Yeah, I have a quick question. With RFP, you said it's going to come out in 2 weeks. And where did you say we could go to access the RFP?
So if you would please drop your information in the chat box and give us your email. We will email you all the RFP. We will also post it on our website. And then we'll do a few other notifications, maybe through Facebook, LinkedIn, and likely there will be a legal notice in the paper if anybody reads that.
Thank you.
You say how long the RFP period is going to be?
So we have to build in the public process. So, somewhere between 60 days or so, roughly. And then we are going to always add a disclaimer to reserve the right to change it as needed based on, information that we get back, questions or any hangups that we have. But ideally, this project should have been done like a year ago. So we're trying to, move as fast as we can with, in relation to, all the agencies that are involved and the funding type that's involved. So.
Are you expecting to release a pre-solicitation notice or anything to give us more information on the project?
Probably not. I think all this information that we have today will be available to you all. And then we'll go straight to, we want to try to turn the RFP around as soon as we can. So we'll just publish that. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question about what kind of accuracy you're looking at in flow data.
That's what will be published in the RFP.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I missed it, but was there who's going to take care of the upkeep of the sites once they're installed? Is there a continuous involvement or is it just?
So that is the sustainability piece is something we are actively working on. So it'll be a partnership likely between the Teche Vermilion freshwater districts, some of the parishes and their local engineers. And it could be a partnership with some of the parishes and us and even UL. So we're still actively defining the long-term sustainability, but what we'll try to do is build in some of that within the RFP for at least maybe a year or so.
Okay.
Don't all show your hand at once.
So we can expect to know how long we would
Yes.
maintain the network prior to this handoff,
Yes,
and that'll be written down.
absolutely. And APC will be very actively involved in that whole transition.
Question about the USGS, the state network that they're putting together.
Yes, absolutely.
So, just kind of like what we're doing with the modeling efforts, how there's consistency amongst the modeling efforts across the state. Are we expected to collaborate and coordinate with USGS and the network they're putting out in terms of SOPs, methods, equipment, et cetera? Should this network look like that network and the way that it's actually installed?
To answer that first, Rachel?
So not exactly, it'll look a little bit different. But what I'll tell you about the coordination is that UL's team has been highly involved in both networks. So naturally, there is going to be some sort of level of coordination from the top down.
But, as far as we know, you don't have to follow the USGS standard.
Right.
So this will be a separate effort.
Yes,
Right, yeah, but USGS has very, very
Strict
specific
standards.
We want standards too, but there could be different standards. Right? But, it's not gonna be a USGS project. But we talk with them, like Rachel said, constantly, and we get their feedback about what we do. And,
and they actually advised us otherwise.
Exactly. But it's not a USGS project, it's not gonna be, you don't have to follow this. And you guys are familiar with the USGS standard, and you probably know what I'm talking about, but, yeah. Standards in terms of also the sensor types, the sensor accuracy, and, we have this whole suite of standards that they follow, but it's not necessarily this one.
Right. Harlan?
The final, is the GIS system that's uploaded now, is it represented to the final determination site?
Yes, I believe so. And again, there may be some modifications that are needed to the site, and we're expecting that, once it goes to construction and somebody's actually out at the site, that things may change slightly, and we're okay with that.
And that's what's happening with the USGS network for the state. Sometimes they go out and put it in that location, they come back and say, well, we cannot because of whatever reason, logistics or accessibility or what have you, and they come back with, oh, we need to change it, this and that.
Can the US be shared with the group? Because there's going to be obviously some heavy civil engineering part to the equipment side of the park. I don't know if all the equipment.
Which one, I'm sorry? What needs to be shared?
And attendee list.
Oh, attendee list, yes. Yeah, if that's okay with everybody, is there any issue with sharing the attendee list? No, okay. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Okay, good.
You're gonna share this presentation?
Yes, yep. So if I have everybody's email, we'll send all this information out to you via email, and we'll also make it publicly available on our website for those who might not been able to attend today.
There was also mention of cameras. I'm assuming in the RFP that it'll list out which locations you might want those cameras at, or is it up to
Yes,
our judgment to put them in
Yes.
certain places?
maybe a little bit of both. I think that's the part of the innovation that we're asking for feedback. I mean, you guys, most of you are experts in this, and so, we're kind of expecting to work together on some of these sites.
I missed the first 2 minutes. What's the total AFC?
AFC,
Or, I'm sorry, available construction?
I don't have that yet.
A round number?
Nope. I deflect.
You've been in a public position.
Probably so.
Is there a plan to store this data in one location at this point or not yet?
that's part of the sustainability, I think, that we're trying to work out. So yes, we have some solutions in mind, in terms of the storage of the data. But, you know, with what entity it resides, that's what we're trying to actively work out. And I think by the time we finish construction and we have some like QA/QC of the data and some of the maintenance, non-maintenance, we'll have all of that worked out. Carlin?
Robert, could you just briefly speak to the data reading that you're anticipating, maybe conceptualize it in terms of the different types of gauges and how frequently, continuously, you know, whatever on the data transmission?
Are you talking about like the frequency at which the measurements?
Yeah.
Something like that. Well, they'll be continuous. That's the expectation of being continuous. At, you know, at most hourly step, probably fine at that. For a rain gauge is 15 minutes, even 5 minutes to somebody, that should be doable. But for water level reading, sub-hourly is generally expected.
So you expect the data to be telemetered every 15 minutes based off your measurements?
When we describe it, we say near to real time. So
what, you know.
The question is, because you mentioned satellite, and you mentioned other telemetries for satellites.
So if we did a-
15 minutes. So that's where we're trying to hammer out where that is. But if we're calling out satellite for satellite, we can't keep to that 15-minute mark or that near to real, well, I guess the near to real time would be that, but
So the satellite idea came as a redundancy measure. So if the existing telemetry went down during hurricane season or whatnot, that there's an added component to be able to read it through satellite.
all that. So your primary
Yes.
telemetry
Would be
probably
something else.
Study.
And again, that's the innovative component that we're kind of seeking feedback.
What would you think of other alternatives? Cellular.
Anybody wants to answer that?
I mean, you know, we are here also for a discussion, right? We are here for a discussion, so feel free to share with us.
a lot of stuff on budget, but
Right, and I guess that's why we're here today, to hear the feedback also from you guys, not only on that question, but just on anything that we.
That might have
we
been
not
presented today.
thought of. There are better ways to do things, Rachel, stop me if I'm saying too much, but.
It's up to you guys if you want to
Yeah,
answer.
it is really more about hearing also, okay, you guys should do it this way, so that way, or you're missing that component, or you're not aware of what's happening in this other state. I think, right?
there's a million ways to find the onion. I give you too much, but personally, your most reliable is your dose. And we've already talked about right now you're in the drought. How often you get the data, it's not going to be 15-minute data, it's not going to be helping you guys out much at all. You're just going to be getting 15-minute data to let you know your water pool is low. So at the end of the day, ghost is going to be what you need. Now, in a point where you need the alarming, that's where you fall back more to your secondary. For us, that's cellular or some other option, maybe even different satellite option. So I wouldn't put all the money and all the effort into cellular up front. I'd put it in goes because that's going to be 95% of what you're going to want to collect. It's that 5% of the time during the flooding event that you're going to be worried about that you need the data faster. So white paper, you get more data up front, and you can backfill that data on the back. You're putting money in the wrong.
But those few hours are the most important hours anyway.
Correct. So white paper, all the data usage, everything else up front, when you can have redundant everywhere, have your GOES data for 95% of your modeling input, and then fall back on cellular or different telemetry options in critical moments when you need the data.
Right.
Here's one question that I just have to ask is, you know, are any of these boxes submersible? Right, so if you're on a bridge and the bridge goes underwater, you know, is there any technology out there where things can be submerged and don't use the data? Or is that like ridiculous? Questions that I
kind of had on my mind going to some of these sites, because I'm like, maybe there's no possible way to, like, unless you create a platform or something, make sure that absolutely there will not be water. That's a.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Then it just comes down to cost, right? The additional cost of making it submersible. We've done things like that before. After Hurricane Sandy in New York, for instance, we made all of the sites submersible. It's just whether you can actually measure anything still, but at least your electronics is kept, but the radar in the water obviously is not no longer measured water.
And I'm thinking too, that that's probably the majority of the sites are not like that. They're gonna, you know, once you get over the bridge and, you know, the arm and everything, you're not gonna have that issue, but like, there could be some sites where they're more susceptible to possibly getting inundated. For example, these sites that are down in the coastal zone. In fact, even the LWI project, you know, some of that stuff, you know, they really look closely at where those sites are. They don't really go very far down into that coastal zone. You start running into some of these issues where you got a 12-foot storm surge or something like that. So probably, you know, if you know, if you look at the gauges that we have, I mean, you probably identify like, oh yeah, that one might be that extra layer of protection. So maybe we can propose something like that, you know, to keep it, you know, the sites back up and running, and even if it's not sampling during.
And you leave that up to us to decide that? Which ones are flooded and which ones don't?
Well, I mean, we have the sites, right? And then we have, there's public information on the flood zones. I mean, I think what we can do is we'll provide definitely the gauge locations. We have all of that pretty much locked in. On the public site there, I believe you can actually click on flood zones and see, you know, how high the base flood elevation is.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Maybe some concerns or considerations as we're releasing the RFP?
Access route to these locations has already been cleared.
Yes, pretty much.
Is that all on public location? Public, yeah.
Most of them, there's a couple of them that probably aren't. And we've identified those.
And are those, you're looking for this team to develop the mechanisms to get there, or?
Probably a combination between us and whoever's, you know, wins the bid.
Is there a scoring criteria for the RFP?
Yes, it'll be published in the RFP.
Are you able to say anything about your expectations for timeline from award to the various milestones?
I think we're flexible. We've been flexible thus far with FEMA. So, you know, ideally, we'd like to see something between a year to 2 years at most, in terms of full deployment and then some back-end things.
Rachel, Larry Kramer, will NOAA or USGS be involved in reviewing the proposals?
Possibly. I'll give you that answer.
Okay.
Does this project seem feasible based on what was presented today? I know you don't have the RFP and you don't have specifics, but just level of feasibility. Yep.
Expensive.
And
There's a lot of unknown.
That's a good point. That's kind of where I'm at, is that it's definitely doable. Just, you know, budget's the really big question, you know.
What are the,
I was gonna ask that too.
yeah, what are the unknowns based on what you heard today? Not the budget, not the money. I think the money is always the unknown, but just what are the unknowns that you wish to know more about? Okay.
Well, and most time when you're, you know, pricing a bid a project, you know, you're gonna have 10 sites that are submersible. You're gonna have, these are gonna attach to bridges. You're gonna know those specifics. You want satellite, or you want cellular, or you want both. You know, the more things that we have to guess, then the more. Yeah, so we try to
say, oh, we want whatever we got, but we gotta cover everything, so that's more expensive.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a specific. You got 132 sites, you want water level, telemetry, cellular, whatever.
Is the practice that you propose different alternatives? This will cost this will cost that, or you guys typically don't do that?
The problem is
We
that,
can request that in our.
Right, okay.
yeah, the problem is that because you're gonna put every option out there.
I mean,
It's expensive to put an RFP together.
I think a huge cost is gonna be how accurate a flow rate you want,
how accurate, what,
how accurate a flow rate you want.
flow rate, okay, yeah.
If you want accurate flow, it's gonna be very, you're gonna have to have people on site making discharge measurements to calibrate whatever device you put out. And that's expensive.
Talking about like rating curves and index velocity methods and all that stuff. And,
The index velocity and everything else is, very low, the level. That's right. So.
Right.
When we see the RFP, we kind of see more, right? We can talk about it.
Yeah.
less.
Yes, absolutely.
Sound like there's a lot of generalizations that.
Yes, today was very generalized. The RFP will be more specific. We'll leave you time for developing your questions. Again, any questions will come to our office and then we'll make the answers available to everybody. And if we need to hold another RFP, well, if we need to hold some type of conference to answer all of the questions, we'll do that.
Since 60 days is your approximate time for response proposal, possibly only extend that to 90 or.
Yes, yes, everything's possible.
Rachel, I just wanted to point out, I think that the RFP will identify which sites or flow or will, that the flow will be requested. So is that correct?
I mean, it's actually on the portal right now. But,
Those
yeah,
sites.
I guess they are looking for more specification than that.
Yeah.
Do you want just a velocity, or do you want a flow rate? Do you want an index velocity? Do you want a stage discharge relation? I guess they are looking.
Yeah, how accurate you want that?
Right.
How accurate you want that?
And have y'all looked at the specific location, how it would be installed? You mentioned 8 different installation types. Some of them might be on piers.
Yeah, so we,
Those specifics identified.
Those would be, we have it all tabulated. We just couldn't do all of that today, but like we have the entire, we have to go through that stuff for the permitting. We have to tell them exactly how we're planning to attach to their bridge or where what kind of work is gonna happen on the river bottom. Like we have to get all of that out there. So that will be incorporated in the solicitations, that you'll have all that information. We just couldn't put all the details here on how all of that is gonna be done.
Any feedback on the portal, the web portal, and how that should work? And
I was gonna ask, that's all, it's all included together. It's not gonna be a separate web portal RFP versus a separate.
that's what, honestly, that's what I guess the feedback they were looking for today is like, we're ideally seeking a turnkey solution. So there's one person that we go to kind of manage the whole project for us. But if we have to come back and like bid this out separately with a web-based portion, we can do that. Again, ideally, we'd prefer not to, but if we have to, we can.
Is there any minimal integration with existing systems that are currently contemplated? Obviously, the LWI state gauges not integrated with that. Test for millions gauges, city of Lafayette. Question marks on both of those.
You want to touch that?
so I guess, so
You.
myself, right, for the, like you said, for the state, it's actually gonna stay on USGS. It's gonna be part of their report and all that stuff. For the city of Lafayette, I know that they have few gauges, few gauges recently. I'm not sure how many more they will add.
They are waiting for our system to be deployed
guess so,
to
right.
increase their,
Right.
I guess, monitoring.
Exactly.
But we're actively involved with conversations with the city of Lafayette to get what they need out of it as well.
And I guess as far as with the Tetra Million, now I can speak to that, but I mean, they are the project and the Tetra Million is part of the project. So, how, whatever sensor you guys have now, how they will integrate with this, I think they will have to, at the end of the day, if we develop a portal, we probably need to talk about that too. Right, bringing the data from your sensors to the same portal.
If I may add too, in terms of, it's not really direct integration, but I do want to point out that this effort kind of evolved with all of these other efforts in mind, like that was all of the feedback. So even though, it's not necessarily an LWI effort, we already considered the fact that LWI has gauge A, B, C, and D. So how do we put X right here so that, it's not like a redundant thing. So that, I guess that level of coordination at a higher level has kind of been factored in. It's implied in design basically that we're aware of these other sites and how this is going to kind of fit within that framework.
For the web portal part of things, you said you didn't know how you're going to store the data long term. Typically, how the web portals work is the portal's created, the person who creates the portal has a cloud account that stores all that data. So then that's built into that long term.
Yeah, we have some of that identified.
Okay, so that it's not really a maintenance cycle. You were talking about long-term maintenance, but the data storage into that, it'd just be a continuation of the web portal over time and that data storage capability.
Yes. And then the monitoring of the data that's coming in, making sure it's the same quality. If there's issues that come up that somebody's addressing, but we have the server-ish kind of identified.
So how much of QAQC happens to the data as it comes, and how much you say, oh no, that's the responsibility of the client now to do their QAQC on the data?
Depends on who's maintaining the site. That's typically what the USGS does. So they know if their sites or the readings are valid or not. But they always QAQC the data. So whoever's doing the long-term maintenance of the sites, that's going to be determined by them. As the data is coming in, is that data good or is that data bad?
I guess I meant about like during the active contract period, where where the contractor is actually putting the file, they are receiving the data, they are putting them in the portal before their contract ends. During that period, what kind of QAQC happens, on contractor side?
That's one of the unknowns that should be in the RFP.
Okay.
How much of it you want it automated versus, on a physical unit. Obviously, the more boots on the ground, the more it can be automated, the less it'll cost. That's where all the unknowns are.
I have a question about the comment about the accuracy of the flow. Could you go into some more? Could you tell us what are the options of, how do you, are there different stages of accuracy out there?
Yeah, so the easiest thing is I'll put a meter out and I'll tell you the flow rate is 800 CFS. If no one goes out to check it, we don't know what the accuracy is. There's nothing to compare to. So you have that level, which is, you don't want that. I doubt if we want that. And if we make a discharge measurement, we can compare what we're outputting to the site or whatever we're calculating on site to that in situ measurement. And then you have normally what the USGS does, they give a percent difference of, and they're normally within 5% of what the actual flow rate, or they want it to be within 5%.
So it's more on the engineering that you do to calibrate the reading more than what the reading actually is. So what would you think the readings that we're getting now, let's say on the typical USGS gauge, let's say if you're familiar with the one at Surrey Street or the ones that you might have on the
They, yeah, So you're normally within that 5% range. And even closer. You can see every discharge measurement that they make in the field is on their website, and it'll tell you how far off the gauge is from what they measure.
And they do this periodically,
Every other month.
every other month. They actually go
Oh,
take an actual reading.
some sites they go month.
So they're not really doing the engineering of the crop. Once they do the engineering, that's done. It's just that they actually go measure with a flow meter that's been calibrated to. And at that point, do they adjust the meter or do they have a conversion?
USGS does it in their database. They do all their adjustments in the database. They don't do anything on site. And it's not an adjustment to the meter itself. It's an adjustment to the rating curve.
Yeah.
The meter doesn't normally, for the meters we sell, they don't need calibration. It's just the data that needs to be calibrated.
That would be like a maintenance, a long-term maintenance consideration.
Yes.
So you'd have to identify which sites you really need that accurate information.
That's where we're gonna bid on it. We need to know how much.
Yeah, we need to know what accuracy we want.
Yeah.
And for where.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm glad you brought it.
To Dr. Abib's question. You know, the raw data is gonna have a lot of splash and everything. It's just gonna have a lot of outliers. So the expectation typically would be that whoever's using the data would do the filtering, the processing of raw data. If there's an expectation beyond that. Process.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
I actually, back to that question, I guess what you're asking for is how much QA/QC goes into the point at handoff, right, before you get to that point. So I think typically it's simply a matter of, does it read what it's supposed to read right now? But any historical like trend of, for the past 2 weeks, is it performing as expected? That's not necessarily part of it unless it's written into spec like that, if that's what you're trying to get at.
Anything from online?
Hey, Rachel, I'm looking at at your mapping system online right now for the Acadiana Gauge Network. These they have 100 sites on here now for the LWI. Is that separate from the ones that this RFP will cover?
Yes, if you're looking at the LWI gauges, then yes, it's a completely separate system.
Okay. So are the sites released now, or do we need to wait the 2 weeks for the RFP?
No, it's on our website now, but I probably won't answer questions today about it just because not everybody has access to the online portal in here. But you can definitely go look at it when you leave the today. And if you're looking at it online, it is on our website.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions before we adjourn? Everybody looks really excited about this project. Yeah.
Just real quick, obviously we did this request for interest, and a lot of interest, so that's exciting. And kind of like I feel the same thing, you have all these questions, but that will be in the RFP. So all your, hopefully your answers will be coming soon, just can't get that now. But I'm glad to see that there's interest and that we're having this discussion. And again, after this, we'll have an attendee list, we'll email you, you have the site, which is publicly available. We can see that link to our site, so everyone can have all the same information that we need to look at before we release the RFP. Thank you.
Imad, anything else you want to mention before we close?
No.
Are you good? All right. Well, thank you all. We appreciate it. Thank you to those who attended online, and then we look forward to hearing more from you guys as we enter this next phase and release the RFP. So.
Thank you.
All right, we're hopping offline. Thank you. Make sure we're out. It should automatically convert.